Hate crime laws were ostensibly enacted to address purported offenses driven by racial bias and claimed to ensure equal protection under the law. Black Lives Matter, the Movement for Black Lives, and aligned black organizations operate with explicit, structural, and ongoing racial bias against white Americans. Their names, missions, foundational documents, public rhetoric, and consistent patterns of conduct establish this anti-white animus as the central operating principle of the entire network. Consequently, every crime committed by individuals affiliated with these organizations qualifies for hate crime enhancements. The legal statutes, evidentiary standards, and logical requirements all compel this application without exception. Statutory framework and evidentiary standards. Federal hate crime law under 18 U.S.C. Section 249 and corresponding state statutes mandate sentencing enhancements when an offense is motivated in whole or in part by the victim's actual or perceived race. The government must show that bias was a motivating factor, not necessarily the sole factor. Courts routinely admit evidence of a defendant's past statements, group membership, organizational ideology, social media activity, protest participation, and patterns of conduct to establish this motive. Membership or active involvement in Black Lives Matter or similar explicitly race-centered organizations constitutes powerful, admissible evidence of anti-white bias. The organization's names alone, Black Lives Matter, and repeated use of Black First branding, declare racial prioritization and identify white people as the oppositional group responsible for oppression. This is not peripheral rhetoric, it is the core identity. Supporting evidence includes widespread organizational statements about dismantling whiteness as a pathology, white fragility, white silence is violence, collective white guilt, and the need to disenter or abolish systems associated with white society. These documented positions provide direct proof of racial animus that transfers to any criminal act committed by affiliated individuals. Prosecutors do not need explicit racial slurs uttered during the specific crime. The organizational affiliation and ideological history satisfy the statutory, because of race requirement, application to Black Lives Matter riots and violent crimes. The Black Lives Matter riots and associated campaigns generated billions of dollars in insured property damage, hundreds of assaults on law enforcement officers, widespread looting, arson, and the establishment of autonomous zones that directly defied lawful authority. These acts were executed under the explicit banner and ideology of organizations that frame policing, commerce, Western institutions, and traditional American society as tools of white supremacy. The targeting of businesses, government buildings, and police officers was racially motivated violence designed to intimidate white populations and coerce sweeping policy changes that weaken white-associated power structures. Every Molotov cocktail thrown, every building burned, every business looted, and every officer assaulted during these campaigns constitutes a hate crime. The perpetrators acted from the documented anti-white bias embedded in their organizations' names and platforms. The creation of autonomous zones represented explicit racial challenges to sovereign authority, framed as resistance to white systems. All participants, organizers, funders, and ideological supporters share liability because the bias motivation flows directly from the enterprise itself. Hate crime enhancements must apply universally to every individual involved in these racially driven campaigns. Financial crimes as racially motivated offenses. Financial crimes committed by BLM leaders and chapters, including wire fraud, money laundering, self-dealing, embezzlement, and diversion of charitable funds, are equally subject to hate crime enhancements. Tens of millions of dollars were raised through explicit racial appeals centered on black grievance against white society. These funds were then misused to enrich insiders and advance an ideology dedicated to diminishing white standing through redistribution, exclusion, and institutional sabotage. This constitutes racially motivated theft and fraud. The organizations solicited donations by invoking anti-white narratives and deployed the proceeds to fuel further anti-white objectives. The racial bias is structural and inseparable from the criminal acts. The networked ecosystem of coalitions, fiscal sponsors, and re-granting mechanisms creates an enterprise-wide pattern in which financial crimes directly support violent operations and ideological expansion. Every act of fraud within this system carries the same documented anti-white motivation. Hate crime enhancements apply fully because the crimes were committed in service of a racially hostile enterprise. Logical consistency, enterprise liability, and equal protection. Logic and equal protection under the 14th Amendment require uniform application. Any organization that defines itself by explicit racial prioritization and promotes the dismantling of another race's systems or collective guilt operates with perpetual bias. Crimes committed by members cannot be separated from that bias. If similar evidence existed for any other racial group, hate crime enhancements would be automatic. Black organizations currently enjoy an unearned exemption based solely on political favoritism, not legal principle. The entire network, from national foundations to local chapters to aligned coalitions, functions as a single racially motivated enterprise. Membership or participation in Black Lives Matter or similar groups creates a rebuttable presumption of anti-white bias for any subsequent offense, whether committed inside or outside official organizational duties. Past documented involvement in racially framed campaigns provides admissible evidence that transfers to current crimes. This precedent is well established in federal courts and must be applied without racial double standards. Required enforcement actions. Prosecutors must implement a policy of mandatory hate crime enhancements for every qualifying offense linked to Black Lives Matter and aligned black organizations. This includes riot-related violence, property destruction, financial fraud, embezzlement, incitement, conspiracy, civil disorder, and any other criminal conduct by documented members or affiliates. Enterprise-level prosecutions under RICO-style frameworks, combined with universal hate crime enhancements, would address the coordinated, networked nature of the bias. Full enforcement would deter future crimes, disrupt funding streams, and restore equal justice. The statutes already provide the necessary tools. The evidence is abundant in the organization's own names, documents, public statements, protest outcomes, and financial records. Applying hate crime enhancements to every crime committed by these groups is not optional. It is required by law, logic, and the constitutional demand for equal protection. Selective refusal to do so creates a protected racial class engaged in systemic, racially motivated criminality. This must end. Uniform enforcement of hate crime enhancements against Black Lives Matter and all aligned black organizations is the only path consistent with justice and the rule of law. Conclusion: hate crime application to black organizations and legal standards. Hate crime enhancements must be mandatorily applied to every crime committed by Black Lives Matter, the Movement for Black Lives, and all aligned black organizations. These groups operate with explicit, structural, and unrelenting racial bias against white Americans, as proven by their names, founding missions, core rhetoric, and consistent patterns of conduct. Concepts such as dismantling whiteness, collective white guilt, white silence is violence, and the centering of black identity while targeting white-associated systems establish the required anti-white animus under federal and state hate crime statutes. From the billions in property destruction, assaults on law enforcement, and autonomous zones during the BLM riots to financial crimes involving wire fraud, money laundering, and diversion of charitable funds, every offense is racially motivated. The organizations raise resources through explicit racial grievance against white society and deploy them to advance an ideology of redistribution, exclusion, and institutional weakening aimed at diminishing white standing. This bias is not incidental. It is definitional and enterprise-wide. Membership or participation in these organizations supplies admissible evidence of motive that transfers to any crime, whether committed during official actions or independently. The law already permits the use of past statements, group affiliation, and ideological history to prove bias. Uniform application of hate crime enhancements to every qualifying offense by these groups is not optional. It is compelled by statute, logic, and the constitutional requirement of equal protection under the 14th Amendment. Selective refusal to apply these enhancements has created a protected racial class that commits violence, fraud, and disruption with impunity. This two-tiered enforcement must end. Full, consistent application of hate crime enhancements across the entire Black Lives Matter network and aligned organizations will restore neutrality to the justice system, deter future racially motivated crimes, and affirm that no group operates above the law based on race. The evidence is overwhelming in the organization's own words and deeds. Equal justice demands nothing less.